Today we're tracking two major developments at home and abroad. President Trump met with Vladimir Putin in Alaska for a summit on Friday with no formal agreement was announced. Both leaders called the talks productive, raising fresh questions about U.S. strategy on Ukraine and the optics of the red carpet reception for the Russian president. Back in Washington, President Trump has ordered the National Guard and hundreds of federal agents into D.C., claiming a crackdown on crime despite data showing historic lows in violence. The move has triggered legal challenges and sparked concern from city leaders. Joining us to break it all down is Richard Stoll. He's a professor emeritus of political science at Rice University. He also serves as a Rice faculty scholar at the Baker Institute for Public Policy. He was with us on Friday. He's back with us again today. Hello there, Dr. Stoll.
Hello.
It's good to have you back. Also, if you would like to join the conversation, you can call or text 713-440-8870. Before we get into all the important topics of the day, I want to take your thoughts on suit or fatigues for Zelensky. What do you think?
I think if I were advising him, I would say fatigues, because that's the image that he has projected. And I understand why he wants to do that. And I think he should continue to do that. I think putting a suit on would look like he's making concessions.
And we did receive an email from Dolores, who agrees. She says he will not wear a suit.
We are continuing to monitor. This is the problem, though, with today's streaming services and stuff. Some folks may see this before we see it, or we may see it before other people, because when the feed is happening.
Yeah, the delay.
The delays. But so far, everyone's been showing up in suits and such. I'm monitoring that. Anyway, Dr. Stoll, let's start with what happened on Friday. What were your takeaways from the Friday summit in Alaska between Putin and Trump? I guess it starts with the clapping and the red carpet, images. What did they say globally?
Well, I think it sends a message that at least our president seems to be closer to the leader of Russia than to the leader of Ukraine, in a situation where the Russians sort of created this war. So I think that sends a bad message. I do feel that the president just thinks, I can persuade anyone to do anything. So it's perfectly fine for me to meet with this guy, and things will come out just fine. And oh, by the way, I'm looking ahead to winning the Peace Prize by settling in this conflict.
When you look at what ended up happening and you see then it seemed to be an abbreviated meeting, some are reporting. You saw the press conference that happened afterwards. And then until, I guess, into the weekend before we got any kind of readout from the president tweeting and such, what do you take away from what actually happened between the two of them, and where does it put us as we go into today's issues in Washington?
I think very little happened in the official sense. Again, I think meeting with Putin without Zelensky sends a pretty strong message, but the actual discussion, I think, didn't go very far.
Which I want to dive a little bit deeper into, because when President Trump was flying to Alaska for this summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, he was very clear. The main goal was a ceasefire. Shortly after meeting with Putin, President Trump reversed himself and said a ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war wasn't critical. Dr. Stoll, how significant is this?
Well, I think number one, I think a ceasefire is important. Other people may disagree, but number two, and more importantly, if you as president say, we're going to sit down and like the big deal we're going to be talking about is the ceasefire, and then that doesn't come out of the discussion, it's like, oh, I guess you don't have very much influence over this guy, or he's somehow persuaded you to change your position. So I don't think that sends a very good message for President Trump to the rest of the world.
And speaking of messaging to the rest of the world, Ernie, and we've all been discussing how President Zelensky is going to show up. We mentioned the red carpet. We saw how President Putin was greeted by President Trump. Would you say that coming from this meeting on a world stage, President Putin came out winning?
I think we have to wait and see what happens over, say, the next week. But at this point, he certainly seems like he came away from that meeting with probably pretty much everything he wanted to accomplish.
Well, and he wanted to keep the land that he's already taken by force. It's almost like if you have $500 and I steal $100 and I say, if you want to keep 400, then you let me keep the 100. Otherwise, I'm going to take the other 4. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I think letting him keep everything sends a very bad message. Now, having said that, how do we get him to back away from that territory? I think that might be very, very difficult unless the West, that is the U.S., working with Ukraine, but also with our NATO allies, sends a very strong message that if you don't back away from this territory, or at least part of it, you're going to suffer grave costs.
Well, what if he wanted part of Alaska? What would Trump's reaction be to that? Because he does want part. He would love to have the Aleutian Islands.
And we did receive a message from the Dark One on our YouTube that says, I'd like to see someone publicly ask Trump that if the U.S. was invaded, would he give up U.S. territory in order to end the war?
You know, Putin wants as much of the North Sea as he can get so he can drill for oil. And that's where a lot of Alaska has a lot of oil. So he would love Alaska, seriously.
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry too much about it. But again, I think at this point, at least, sending a message that says, well, maybe Russia can keep a lot of this territory is the wrong message.
But didn't Senator, her name escapes me, I was just about to say it, Murkowski say, in a joking manner to Trump on his way to the summit in Alaska, don't give away any Alaskan territory. So the thought was already out there. You wouldn't think to say that even as a joke to anyone else. So I just find it interesting that she made that comment.
I think so.
Yeah.
I am watching. I'm watching the arrival in Washington while we're talking right now of these other world leaders. Trump is not receiving them. Very differently than the way he was in Alaska receiving Vladimir Putin. I'm curious, should he come out when Zelensky arrives?
I think he should. I think, if he doesn't, that sends a message that our president, is very strongly tilting towards Putin. And I think that's a bad message to send. So yes, I think he should meet Zelensky.
I was watching Meet the Press over the weekend. Dr. Stoll and United States Secretary State Marco Rubio was saying that having all of these global leaders joining in this meeting today was always a part of the plan. Do you think that these were conversations that were happening before President Trump was meeting with President Putin?
No, I do not. I think the way this has developed, it's really been, this is what Trump wants to do. And again, he sees himself as being able to pursue things and get what he feels is best because he's a very important, powerful person.
Well, let me ask you this, because not a lot has been made of it. But according to reports, Russia has taken 20,000 children from Ukraine. 20,000 children. And of course, Ukraine wants their children back. But that doesn't seem to be a big point of discussion. Do you think it will become one today?
I'm not sure it will even become a point today, but I think it will be back on the agenda as things go forward.
Well, it's kind of the first presence of the First Lady in all of this, sending the letter that she sent to Putin about the children. And that was, I thought, kind of a surprise move, because here's someone who stays relatively in the background, to say it as lightly as possible. And all of a sudden, she's on the world stage with policy, sending this letter through her husband to the head of Russia.
Well, I know Celeste would give all the land in the world to get her children back.
Absolutely.
I mean, priorities are priorities. And I can't believe that The Ukraine is not any different than we are.
And when you become a mother, you feel for
Children.
every child
Yeah, everyone.
that is out there.
I would just think that it would be higher on the list, but Trump doesn't seem to think so.
I want to remind everyone we are speaking with Dr. Richard Stoll, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Rice University. If you'd like to join the conversation, have thoughts, questions about what we're talking about, give us a call, 713-440-8870. For a minute, I want to go back to the whole thing about all these other European leaders coming, and we've got France and Germany, and we've got the EU, and we've got NATO, among others, coming to the White House. You made a comment about, this is what Trump wants. I take it more as they're coming to say, slow your roll. Zelensky is not walking alone. He has all of this support behind him. And it's a chance for these world leaders to be in a room with Trump, with Zelensky, to say, you have to find your allegiance here. Is it to this part of the world or is it to that part? And which side of the war are you on? How off am I with this thought?
No, I think you're right about why they are coming. Okay. Again, I think what Trump wants to portray is, I'm the person that's making all this good stuff happen. And it's nice that my European friends are going along with me. I think that's the signal he wants to send. But I think they're here because they are concerned that Trump may drive this in a direction that they do not approve of, and they want more support for Zelensky.
Can you elaborate on that direction?
I think that they are concerned that Trump will basically give Putin whatever Putin says he wants. So as far as we can tell, what Putin would like right now is all the land that they have acquired by force. He wants that to remain Russian, for example. Now, having said that, it's not necessarily easy. Even if all the U.S. and all these countries said, you must withdraw from the following places. It's one thing to get together and say that, and I think that would be important. But what happens if Putin says, no, we're not going to do that? What's the next step in that process? And things could get pretty tricky. But I do think the U.S. position should be Russia needs to withdraw from all the areas of Ukraine that it has occupied.
Would this be reasonable? Okay, Putin, you can keep all of the land that you've taken from Ukraine, but now going forward, Ukraine will be part of NATO so that you can't take anything more.
I think that would be at least a reasonable approach to try to convince Putin that, if you keep going like this, bad things are going to happen to you, because the next time that you want to take something from Ukraine, it's going to involve all of NATO, and you're not going to want to see that.
Which,
Big Brother will be there.
Dr. Stoll, how much negotiation can actually happen if you don't have Russian President Putin in the room and you don't have Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky sitting at the table?
No, you're right. I don't think you can reach certainly not a final conclusion without those people being in the room, so to speak. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, well, the U.S., hopefully acting with our European allies, can collectively say, we together believe this is where things should go, but it can't happen without those two agreeing to it.
A Camp David moment, right?
I want to move on to what's going on in Washington, D.C. besides this summit in a second, but I quickly want to say, from my read of this, what we saw happen on Friday was Putin basically said exactly what he's been saying. He wants this region. He's taken this region. He's going to keep this region. I don't see anything having happened really in that Alaskan summit. And then we look at Washington, and we know Zelensky's position. We know the EU's position because they were meeting before this even happened. And they're basically going to come and say, I'm guessing, we are not ceding this territory. This is a sovereign nation that was invaded by an aggressor. So by tomorrow, are we exactly in the same place we were a week ago, or do you see actual shifts happening?
Well, I don't, I don't think it's likely there'll be a shift in terms of where shall we say, the lines are drawn on the territory. But we could see uh, the European countries saying, we think you should withdraw. If you don't, we are going to become more supportive of Ukraine. We are going to propose that Ukraine join NATO, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't expect to see a change right now, but we could see a situation where the Western countries really stand together and put more pressure on Russia.
Richard Stoll is the Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Rice University. Professor Stoll, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.